There's nothing like getting a letter in the mail. I don't know, letters don't usually come like they used to. We do text messaging, we do emails, but as far as actually sitting down and handwriting a note, a thank you card, a birthday card, there's something special about that. It means a lot. In fact, when I usually get a letter, I usually hold on to it. Someone's taken the time to go out and find a particular card or to write a message to me in a way that it just means a little bit more than what you would normally see in a text message. Text messages are easy, but at the same time, letters speak volumes. Now, one of the things at Bluebell that I've really enjoyed in the role that I'm in now is to hear and see letters that come to Bluebell on what people think. Normally, it's what people are requesting. It's normally what is the favorite flavor that they can't find and they don't understand while it's not there. But I thought it'd be fun to just take a look at a couple of letters that I have kept over the years and kind of put this together, maybe a little bit of a package to show you the range. The first came from a 12-year-old girl who took her request very, very seriously. Now, it wasn't necessarily written, it was actually a ransom note. As you can see at the top, it's got a picture of cows, and it says, "We got your cows. Bring back cantaloupe and cream, or else." And if you can't tell, that's a picture of a hamburger. Now, we did study the picture, and we told her, unfortunately, after looking at the picture, that you got the wrong cows. See, you can't tell, but those cows aren't smiling, and if you've been around at all, you know where I'm going. The reason why Bluebell ice cream tastes so great is because the cows think Brenham is heaven, and our cows smile. Most of the time. When it gets over 101, 102, they start to frown a little bit. I just thought that it took a lot of imagination to write such a letter. The second one probably had more impact on me than anything I've ever read. We get a lot of different varieties, but this particular letter was written from someone that starts out by saying, "Dear Bluebell, I wanted to write to you to share you the memory of a special man with you, my grandpa. Paul passed away this morning at 86 years old." Now, I don't know about you, and you read it in a letter and you have someone that has written to you, and on the day that someone special has passed away, it got my attention. I got up, shut the door, closed the blinds, just in case I knew where we were heading. The story about Paul was so, and you can't really read it, but it talks about a man who loved his Bluebell ice cream. And if you ever went to his house, that was one of the first things he would ask is, "What flavor do you want?" And if you didn't tell him a flavor, well, then he'd just sneak off and find one that he thought you would like. In fact, he had a separate freezer for nothing but Bluebell ice cream. Now at this point, I felt like I had a deep love for Paul myself. No question. But you see, it goes on to say, over the past few years, Paul's mind was overtaken by Alzheimer's, but he remained faithful to Bluebell. This past month, as Paul's mind and body deteriorated, he wouldn't eat or drink, and he couldn't remember his love for Bluebell. But if we brought him some homemade vanilla ice cream, his blue eyes would sparkle as the flavors tickled his taste buds. And for just that moment, we had our Paul back. And that is priceless. I don't know about you. I know that we're just talking about ice cream, but it pulled together to me that what we do means so much more. That anything that we do unto the Lord. And it has an impact. And in this case, it had a major impact in Paul. Well, if we take it a little bit further, and as special as that letter is, we have the privilege to have letters that we have in our home. There's 66 that have been put together. They're filled with romance and some spy and some poetry and some songs. It talks about life. It talks about death. It talks about your future, and it talks about hope. And of course, I'm talking about the Bible. 66 incredible books put together over a period of time that today still are eternally changing lives. Now, as you can see up on the screen, Letters from My Father has kind of a two meaning, because obviously letters that came in the Bible are from my father. But that particular picture of the Bible happens to be my dad's. And let me introduce you to a man that I would say has shaped my life, has shaped, again, not just our family's life, but the community in which he lived, my father. As you'll see a picture of us, so this is the last, the one on the left was probably the last one taken before he passed away in January of last year. But my dad lived the Bible. He didn't just read the Bible. He didn't just talk about the Bible. My dad lived the Bible. Now, as you can see in the pictures, and I think we have a few that you'll kind of go through, he used his Bible like we probably need to use as an owner's manual. He wrote on every single page from the beginning of it all the way to the back. He even tried to change some of the cities on the maps. No, I'm kidding. But he lived in his Bible, and if you were to be at his house on a Saturday, we'd be watching either football or whatever the activity is. He always had his Bible right next to him, and he'd be preparing for the next morning Sunday school lesson. What made it so special is he'd pull these little nuggets, as you can see. He'd say, let me show you what I found. Or let me show you what God told me this week or showed me this week. He lived the Bible. He didn't just read the Bible. And he had such an impact from that. It was always just, it was just neat to be able to call home and say, what'd you find out this week? What's on your mind? What are you dealing with? Of course, he'd turn it right back around and say, well, forget about me. What are you dealing with? And so it was a very special lifetime journey with Dad and the notes that he had. And after he passed away, that's what I requested from my two brothers and sisters. I said, if you don't mind, I want Dad's Bible. And so every morning, I'd say for the most part, I get up early. My wife makes fun of me. Usually 4:30, 4:45, I just wake up. God and I have this little thing where if I wake up, he wants to talk. And that's usually what the first thing in my mind, God has something he wants to tell me. And so I get my coffee, and now not only do I get to study Letters from My Father, I get to read it with notes from my dad. And so that's a very, very special thing. Dad would tell you that to be a Christian, and a lot of what we're going to be covering is journeying, that's a word. If it's not, let's make it one. It's getting through life as a Christian and the steps in which you take along the way and in the different phases of life. He would say that, look, Ricky, you're going to have some highs. You're going to hit peaks like you wouldn't believe, and you're going to have some lows that you'll think you'll never be able to get out of. But most of your journey is on the way up or the way down. And so it's what you do with that journey. What has God have in store for you along the way? And so that's really a lot of what I want to cover today. The first thing he would say is to be prepared. Y'all are going out to camp this week. Are you prepared? Let me share a quick story. My wife, I told her this morning I was going to share this. I had not told her, but prior to, we didn't vote. I hope we're still talking when we get to the end of the day. We went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming last year. It was kind of a bucket list thing for both of us. And part of that bucket list was to go to the Grand Tetons and to go out to a place called Jenny Lake. Now, if anybody's ever been to Jackson Hole and Yellowstone, Jenny Lake is a beautiful lake that sits at the base of the Grand Tetons. And what they said is you need to get there, but get there early and take the boat right across the lake and then hike up into the mountains to what they call the Hidden Falls. Beautiful falls, but you can't see unless you take the journey. So we got up early, got our coffee, drove out, and yeah, we got there early. We were the first ones, I think, there, maybe the second car. And we were there so early that we found out the boat didn't even leave for a couple hours. So we discussed this game plan of just walking around the lake instead of waiting on the boat to take us across the lake. Well, we discussed it. I think we voted, I'm not sure, but I talked her into, let's just walk. It can't be that far. Let's have fun. So with one bottle of water each and one can of beer spray between the two of us, we started out on this great journey. We were laughing, having fun. We were communicating. God was good. And we walked. And we walked. And we walked from what was dry ground to kind of moist ground to wet ground to white ground to snow. And it got thicker and deeper. And at one point, I think she stepped a little off the path and the snow went up to her thigh, and I pulled her back out. And we did have a bottle of water. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but that was good. And we walked literally, I don't remember, probably 3 hours. What made it so bad is that we actually lost the lake. That was our reference point. We thought we'd just walk around the lake. Then what was unusual is some people that I guess had gotten there before us that were even less prepared, they were coming back. They had already given up. One guy had on shorts and flip-flops. Yeah, and I thought, that guy's crazy. He obviously wasn't prepared. Anyway, we walked to the point where we finally came to a sign that said, boat ramp to the right, Hidden Falls to the left, and we just kind of looked at each other. I think at this point we were pushing 17,000 steps, if that means anything. But all I know is we still had half a bottle of water, and we were still good. Well, we decided to make our way to the Hidden Falls, and that good minute and a half of taking beautiful pictures and then racing to the boat made it all worthwhile. My point in all that story is you have to be prepared. How do you prepare yourself on a daily basis when you go out into the world to do what God has asked you to do? So point number one for me would be prayer. My dad was insistent upon just bathing what you do in prayer. Now, what's interesting is I always thought of dad as the wisdom. You go to dad when you have the questions. You go to dad when you're dealing with something. In fact, I went to dad when I was at Baylor because I had to follow a company for a full semester, and I had no idea as a sophomore in college what company that would be. He happened to be reading a little article on a little company in Brenham, Texas called Bluebell. And it was through that article and through his advice that I went down and not only wrote the paper, but went back and interviewed for what now, 41 plus years later, it's been a career. That's from God, through my dad. I will tell you that for sure. But I have to add one little caveat to it is I can't leave mom out on this because see, mom in our family was our prayer warrior. Dad, you went to for advice, but if you needed prayer, you call mom because you knew good and well, mom not only prayed, she specifically prayed. And I don't remember a time that I wasn't around my mom that she didn't say, how can I pray for you? How can I pray for your kids? You know I'm praying for every one of them by name. So mom definitely was our prayer warrior. And between the two of the example from the wisdom side of dad and the prayer warrior side of mom, we had an incredible family home. I know that's unusual, and I don't want to take that for granted. And I know that there are a lot of you out today that are hearing this that are saying, well, I didn't have that. I didn't enjoy that type of an environment. But I'm here to tell you that we have a Father in heaven that has love that goes so much beyond what I've just described in my own home. So prayer life was important. And one thing that mom would always say is don't always be the one doing the talking. Remember to be still and know that I am God, which comes straight out of Psalms. Give God the opportunity to talk. Give God opportunity to lead. And so the combination of just presenting our request and our praises to the Lord, and that's what he wants. He also says, listen, be still, and know that I'm God. And so that really was the stepping point of coming out of the gate on a daily basis. How I start my day, it's on my knees with the Bible, waiting for the instructions of the day. And so much of the journey can seem day in and day out, but you don't know what God's doing. And he's working collectively together, all for his good. And you just have to be ready and be a vessel for that. The second thing I would say is to be engaged. Now, this one's probably a tough one from a Father's Day perspective, of a father's perspective. You need to be not only committed mentally, but in the game. And what I mean by that is being different. Now, I'll share a couple of stories today that deal with deer. My dad absolutely loved the white-tailed deer. And we grew up around not only going out to property and looking for deer and hunting, but he just loved deer. In fact, in his later days, he kept a big 55-gallon can in the garage of corn, and he'd scoop up a bucket, and we'd go out, or we'd watch him go out, and he'd have his ball cap on and his radio on, always listening to the Astros. He was an avid Astro fan. And he would be feeding the deer. And it got to the point where it was pretty humorous. The deer would come and just wait on him. They'd just lay down. And when is he going to be here today? He's running a little late. But he loved deer. But he always used deer, too, in when he would explain stuff. And so as we took trips, he would say, when we'd be a little feisty in the car, he would say, look out and see if you can spot the deer. They're there. They're there. You just have to look for them. And so we would be in the car, and we would be driving, and we would act like we would see him, and he would know that we didn't. But we would say, Dad, how are you able to spot them so quick? And he said, you have to look in the scene of what doesn't belong. What doesn't belong. Now, deer belong in the woods, don't get me wrong, but they're not usually in a place where you can spot them like cows or horses when you drive down the road. So when you look at the scene, look for what doesn't belong. And what I ask is, are you a deer that's in the world? Do you blend in? Or do you not necessarily belong? See, we're in this world, but we're not of this world. And how we live our life, and how we engage at home, and how we engage with our wives, or wife, that's New Testament. Want to make sure we're still good. Okay. It's going to be a long ride back to Brenham is all I got to say. But how we live our life at home with our kids, with our spouse, how we live our life at work. And then how we live our life in the world. Your kids and your spouse know you better than anybody else. And what would they say? Do you blend in or do you stand out? Are you different? When people look at you, do they see something different? When you're at school, when you're with your friends, do you make that stand on what God would want you to be? And the only way to know that is to be engaged and stay engaged. And so I've never forgot that principle. As I look out, I'm trying to find out not necessarily what doesn't belong, but what looks unique. And as Christians in a dark, dark world, we need to look unique. We need to look like there's hope, and that hope comes from Jesus Christ. Dad would then also stress there's going to be storms. Brace for the storms. And again, the highs that are there are incredible, and they're mountaintop experiences, but the journeys that usually take you through the valleys are the ones that you remember the most. And I will tell you firsthand, in the struggles that I have personally gone through, if it wasn't for being prepared, it would have been incredibly, incredibly tough. I love Mark 4:35 through 40. We won't read it, but I will paraphrase the story where Jesus has been preaching. He's sitting in a boat, and he's looking back at the shore to the multitudes that have come to hear him. It's the end of the day, and he says, let's go across to the other side. And so the disciples say, that's a good idea, let's go. They turn, they take off, and where does Jesus go? He goes to the front of the boat, finds a cushion, and the part that I love the most is he goes to sleep. Well, what happens? The storms come. In fact, the storms come to where the waves are crashing against the boat. He still sleeps. Now, I don't know about you. I've been on a lot of boats and ships, but when that boat's going up and down, the last thing I think I could possibly do is be able to sleep. And the disciples come and they wake him up and they, do you not care? Do you not know what's going on? And he stands up and he looks out and he's, peace be still of the waves. And he turns and says, oh, you have little faith. And I think, wow, how Savior of the world is capable of going up to the front of the ship and even in the worst of times being able to go to sleep. And so when I've gone through my struggles, that's exactly where I've gone. I will get in bed and I will literally think in my mind, you know, Jesus has this all under control. And if he can sleep through the storm, then I'm going to sleep with him. That's not easy to do. I think of Philippians 4, 6 and 7, but don't be anxious about anything, but in everything through prayer, praise, and supplication, present your requests to the Lord, and the peace of God that passes all understanding will guard your heart and your mind. And that place, if you can ever get to in the worst of storms, when you can find that peace that passes all understanding, it's an incredible, incredible thing. When I was in high school and college, I ran some track. This was pre-Bluebell days. I weighed about 125 pounds. True story. I could turn sideways and pretty much go anywhere I wanted, and not many people could see me. But I remember running the mile and 3 mile and long distance races. There was a point in time in the race, especially the longer the distance, that you would just feel like quitting. And all of a sudden, you'd get that second wind. And if you've ever run and you know what I'm talking about, you know exactly where I'm going. In life, when you get to the point where you just don't feel like you can keep going, and you get to the point where God says, turn it over to me, let go. And that peace that passes all understanding that comes, it doesn't make a bit of sense, is that second wind that I like to refer to and say, okay, God, I don't know where this has taken us, but you've got the reins. And usually when we let go, that's what takes place. Well, I'll end with this last story that I think probably sums everything up together. And that is, if we could revert back into time, and when Dad would ask me as a little kid, hey, Ricky, you want to get up tomorrow early and we're going to go deer hunting? And forget about the hunting part. Hopefully that's not offensive, but it was just a great opportunity. In fact, I didn't hear deer hunting. All I heard was, hey, you want to go spend some time with your dad? And you bet I do, Dad. And those times where we'd get up and get in the car and we would drive out to our property, even if we weren't talking, we were together. There was something special about just being with Dad. And that's so true with our Lord, just spending time with him. Well, when I was real young, in maybe one of the first trips out, we'd get out of the car, get our things, and he'd say, okay, now we're going to take off and we're going to go together. And here's the key. You got to be quiet. You've got to be extremely quiet. That's the goal, to get to where we're going. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, a 5 or 6 year old, that's not a hard thing for a 5-year-old to do, to be quiet in the woods, in the dark. But he would say, just stay close to me, and we'll make it, we'll hit our goal, and we'll be able to get to the deer stand. And so we'd take out, and we would walk, and of course, as a kid, I'd be caught up with the darkness and the sounds. And then the next thing I would know is I'm getting further away from Dad, and Dad would turn and say, Ricky, you're getting too far away from me. You're in the dark. Come. And so as I'd rush up, of course, stepping on sticks, breaking limbs, and making all kind of noise, he'd say, if you will just stay close with me, we'll make it there, and we'll achieve our goal. So as we would walk, I finally caught on, if I could just, where he would step, if I could put my foot right where he stepped, I knew it was a safe landing spot because he'd already been there. And so that was then my goal. As a little kid, I would reach out and hit that spot and then look for the next step. And what I realized too is the flashlight in which he carried gave just enough light to get to that next step. But if I would concentrate, give all my attention, even as a little kid, to hitting the step by step, blocking off what the world around me was trying to tease me with, or the scary things that seemed to be out there, that I would please my Father. I will never forget that, and I'm sure he did not plan it this way, but that story has stayed with me my entire life because that is so much the way God is with us. Jesus Christ is the light of the world. He's the flashlight. And as we journey and as we walk, there are times that all we can see is that next step. But if we concentrate and we give ourselves to those steps and we trust, even when it doesn't make sense, then we'll achieve what God has for us. Because you see, the beauty that we have today is the fact that we have a personal Savior in Jesus Christ. And I gave my life to him back when I was 11 years old, and the journey has been incredible. The weird thing is, the tough times are what made me who I am. And at work, we've had some tough times. At home, we've had some tough times. But we got a Father in heaven that also went through tough times by allowing his Son to come to this earth, not just to show us how to live, but he went to the cross to die and came back. All we have to do is place our faith and trust and step where he has led us to step. And the beauty for that is, again, we have that flashlight. And I'd like to say that flashlight can be right here, letters from my Father.